2. A Scream in the Night. The 49th day of mourning arrived with little pomp, but I didn't have grief on my mind as I took a seat in the throne room of Storm's Keep. I'd spent the remainder of the day before reading the histories and searching for an obscure solution to my dilemma. Yet, fortune hadn't favored my efforts. Almost an hour before the council would arrive, I sat on a chair I'd had placed in front of the throne, not wishing to make claim by sitting on the actual Serpentine Throne. The birds sang outside the open windows in the stone walls, and Otar watched over Storm's Keep from clear blue skies. Since I would present myself as leader at the meeting with the Storm Sorcery Council, I'd allowed Mother Feathergala to bind my hair, as propriety dictated. At the end of the day, I would pay with pain throughout my temples and neck. Still, tradition reigned. Eerie silence turned into a clamor when the meeting's attendees and the guard arrived promptly at the 9th bell. My family and their first advisors procured seats to the left of the throne, the area designated for the ruler's family. The 4 leaders of each large storm sorcerer family to the right, and the clergy at the end of the long meeting table facing the throne. As the portly Evangale patriarch moved to his chair, I discerned a cut of his gaze toward my sisters and aunt, Nadialine in particular. Then his eyes moved to the other 3 advisors in flitting glances. Did he hope I wouldn't notice his manner? That he seemed insecure amid the others on this council? I cleared my throat, and he gathered himself, a smile plumping his cheeks further. Along with the Storm Sorcery Council, the Lajja brought a retinue of city guards people and posted them outside the throne room. He stepped to my side and asked, "Is all well, Lady Evangale?" When I nodded tightly, he brushed a hand over mine and joined his team. I held a hand out to a waiting Edamine Halogal, signaling him to call the meeting to order. He took a few timorous steps and struck the gong with a strength his posture belied. The commotion settled, and he invoked Atun's grace. In sequence, the other priests called upon Otar and Selene. When the invocations were done, Tasmin bowed and took her seat. Everyone turned toward me. I pushed myself up from my chair and held both hands wide. "My fellow Nantai leaders, I've asked you here today to make a proposal." A rumble went up, large for a crowd of only 13. I closed my eyes briefly, awaiting silence. When the questions faded, I said, "It is not my intention to declare for the Serpentine Throne at this time." Another rumpus ensued, to which I raised my hands further. Upon silence, I continued, "I do wish to hear your thoughts on this declaration. My sisters, Immarisel, Nestrine, and the Triad provided their thoughts in a private meeting yesterday at the Citadel. But let us proceed in an orderly manner. As such, my sisters sat quietly, with mouths in tight lines. Nestrine reached for a goblet, and Immarisel remained hauntingly motionless, her sharp green gaze locked with mine. A chill ran up my spine, and I suppressed a shudder. To my right, I addressed the first of the Storm families. "Azurine, please share the Nightingale concerns with the council." The matriarch of the Nightingale family shifted in her seat. "Lady Mairynne, I mean no disrespect, but our people rely on leadership. Without an emperor or empress, thieves and murderers run rampant. From the days of Tenyo Machinine, the Storm Sorcerers have agreed that the leader keeps the laws and histories within the Storm's Keep annals. Also, without a leader, there is no room for change. This is the first written law of the Nantai people." Tipping my head to show respect, I said, "Thank you, Lady Azurine. I do not intend to disregard the laws of Nantai, and what my forebearers have written weighs heavily on my decision. Is there aught you would add in the way of concerns from your family?" "There is not." I moved on. "Very well. Lucas, will you share the concerns of the Thundergall family?" The Thundergala patriarch stood and paced behind the families, stroking the overlong hairs extending in a point from his chin.
My Lady of Evangale, on behalf of my family, I thank you for the opportunity to address you and this council in this manner, although it is outside of protocol during the mourning rituals.
Yes, Lucas, I'm well aware of that, but given the circumstances, I felt certain this meeting was necessary. Lucas continued.
That is a wisdom beyond your years, Lady Mairynne.
I held up a hand and addressed the entire council. For the remainder of this meeting, we may dispense with the titles. I am seeking debate, if you will. I do not wish to get lost in the words that often make our proceedings lengthy. We must return to the sanctity of mourning as soon as possible. I scanned the room, searching for approval. Nods affirmed, and to Lucas I said, "Please, continue."
In the markets, our family has witnessed a series of uncharacteristic thefts since Tenyo Azarine disappeared. With the help of the guards, we have arrested several pickpockets in the streets. The holding cells in the city gates are nearing full. I know we only have a few days remaining, but I urge you to accept your duty as soon as our laws allow.
He returned to his seat. Addressing the third of the 4 families, I looked to Omine. And the council from Havengall? Omine, rounder than most with thinning hair, blushed a bright red as he answered.
Our concern lies with the other castes. In the Haven, we have heard rumors that many of the nobles from the lower castes are developing plans to challenge the storm sorcerers for the throne. The rumors say that they believe having the empress murdered and the emperor disappear shows weakness with the Evangales, as well as across the storm sorcerer caste.
Disturbances in the marketplace, along with the concerns of not fulfilling the first law, were of minimal concern compared to the lower castes contriving plans against the storm sorcerers. Have you followed up with the guard on these rumors, Omine? He shook his head vigorously enough that his cheeks billowed. Disregard the fact that it is business, and do speak with Gensui Thalaja on the matter today or tomorrow.
Yes, Lady Mairynne. I will bring my sons who heard the gossip to the guardhouse later today.
At this, he fell silent. I raised my chin to Solarine Donsgala, the final of the 4 family leaders sitting on my father's council. Her look struck me, as it always did, with hair the color of an apple's inner flesh, and eyes so light they almost seemed clear. Such light features were uncommon among the Nantai people, and truly haunting. Accepting my cue, she said,
The Donsgala kindred have no qualms awaiting your decision, Lady Mairynne. Patience was one of Tenyo Azarine's best qualities, and may be the very ingredient that ensures the peace we've known under his reign.
Thank you, Solarine. Aunt Nadia? I said, addressing her in the familiar. My mother was your twin. Do you have counsel you wish to impart? Omine Evangale interrupted.
Lady Mairynne, if I may.
I raised a brow toward him, shocked by his insolence. He blushed a deeper red, but adhering to my earlier advice for candidness, he continued.
Your aunt has no place on this council.
Master Evangale, I have called this meeting. You will see that my sisters sit here as well, and they are also not a part of this council. In the absence of my father's or my mother's wisdom, I wish to and will consult with my aunt. I turned back to Nadia, motioning for her to take the floor. Please.
Mairynne,
she started. A stab of guilt pierced my gut as she spoke. I reached for the warm and cold tokens that hung about my neck. I distanced myself from my aunt after my mother's death, finding it difficult to look upon someone who was, yet who was not, the vision of Mairynne Evangale. Even her voice sounded similar in the lilt of her words.
Nora.
Nadia choked on her sister's name, swallowed, and continued.
My sister loved her children with her entire soul, but she was also a patriot of Nantai. She believed the nobles should work together to unite the people and invite the small folk and the casteless into the politics of the country.
This caused an uproar from the council members. I held up my hand and waited until it had died down, then motioned to my aunt. Nadia continued.
She gave her daughters room to grow into who they chose to be, and I believe she would stand by your instincts. I will honor what I believe would be her decision to support you in yours.
A lump grew solid in my throat, and I had no more answers than I had before. I couldn't find the words to speak for a long moment. My sisters, the Triad, and the rest present began to debate whether I should ascend to the Serpentine Throne or not, as if I were not present. Quite possibly, I wasn't. My vision blurred as I considered. When I came back to myself, I cleared my throat as loudly as I could. Some of the conversation abated, but the last I heard, predictably, was Omine's gravelly voice.
There's also a rumor that the Ryū will awaken.
Enough! I shouted and stood. My mother's grave is not cold. We have no evidence that the dragons are returning. We have naught to worry about from the castes. They hold the Nantai mourning period as sacred as we do. The small folk have never been of concern, and my mother lost her life in her desire to unite the lands. I spent the afternoon and into the evening yesterday reading the histories, looking for one case that might resemble our own. It saddens me to say I've been unsuccessful so far. I had hoped to have better guidance when I asked you here to propose that we wait until I have more information on Father's disappearance. Alas, that is what I propose, that we wait and that we send a team in search of Tenyo Azarine. With less gusto, I added, but that does not seem to be on the minds of any of our people. Nadia offered me a smile, but the others present sat in silence until Azurine spoke softly. Mairynne, such a decision is unprecedented, and we have no ruler to record the decree. Nodding once, I prompted. Then let us take a vote. Those in favor of executing the ascension as soon as the mourning is complete? Carine, Imrizel, Azurine, Lucas, and Omine raised hands without hesitation. Yasmin and the Triad followed suit, and Nestrine, of course, mimicked Yasmin. I felt hollow. Did they not believe there was a chance for Father? And why were they all so certain that I could handle the mantle of ruler when I myself held no such belief? In truth, beyond longing for my father's return, I wanted to see the world beyond Storm's Keep and meet more of the people I'd rule one day. I'd been so sequestered here, in this castle, mostly apart from even the city below. Protected, my parents and caregivers had named it, but it felt like little more than a prison. I'd had so little experience with other castes. What were the Frost Fighters or Stone Singers like? I'd never met an Underhill dweller, and I couldn't even recall the natures of the Cloud Courtiers. The casteless, the guilds within Nantai, the list went on and on. I had little but inexperience, ignorance, and naivety to offer our people from where I'd lived within my stone-walled tower. With a deep breath, and losing hope with every second, I called for the alternative. Those in favor of sending a search party for Tenyo Azarine? I raised my hand. Nadia and Solarine did the same. The Triad and Lucas raised their hands as well, for a second time in as many options. I felt my brows heavy as I turned to each of the latter one by one, questioning their meaning. Lucas said,
Lady Mairynne, your question was flawed. If you mean to ask if I believe we should wait, I must lower my hand.
That is what I intended, Lucas. The Triad lowered their hands along with Lucas. Defeated, I rolled my shoulders back. 11 days remained, and I planned to spend that time with the history books, searching for another solution. In the meantime, I made a choice. Yasmin, you will be in charge of the preparation for ascension. Do it quietly. The most unlikely, carefree person in the room, she gasped with widening eyes when I charged her with a task so important to the Nantai people. Others exchanged surprised glances. Good. I'd turned the tables at least a little. As for the rest, you will now visit the Citadel and swear oaths that this decision will not go beyond these walls. I still have time to change my mind. You are dismissed. Reaching for my storm sorcery worked best with my eyes closed, for reasons I'd never understood. In need of the wind, I did this now, and reached out with my senses, pulling the air close and envisioning the path to my quarters. The 13 sorcerers in council, as well as all the guards posted outside, also possessed storm magic. Maybe theirs functioned differently than my own, but nevertheless, the sudden gust indoors would be of little consequence. As the wind gathered, I opened my eyes and rode the gale out of the throne room and all the way to my private door, where I stopped and looked up and down the corridors. Alone. Wondrously alone. I barred the door and planned to remain alone for the long remainder of the day. It took me the better part of an hour to disrobe and release my braids, but once they were loose, I slipped into a gloriously soft tunic and a pair of pants. My hair, crimped and wild, rejoiced with the freedom. I refused knocks at my door, even with the promise of food. My stomach roared, but I ignored its demands. If they chose, my people could reach me by window, breaking another decorum. My space held me in safety. Under Otar's bright watch, and for the first time in 49 long days, my body rested easy, even if my mind did not. Throughout the day, I tried to distract myself with the epic songs recorded by the scroll workers, but my thoughts often strayed back to the notion I'd accepted my duty to become empress. Inside, I railed against it still. When frustration and anger overtook me, I hurled a scroll across the room and cried out, "Why, Father, have you left me to accept this responsibility? Why did you not name Karine or Yasmin? I barely have my majority." I sank to my knees in the center of my room, arms raised to anyone or any being who might listen. Do I not get a chance to live first, to learn of this world? I received no reply. Twilight came, but before Selene took her position in the night sky, I donned a cloak, pulled a large painting away from the wall, and slipped through the hidden door within my rooms, into a network of tunnels and stairs, known only to royalty and a handful of those sworn to protect the secret. I carried 2 candles, one lit and the other in my pocket for the return to my chambers. Eager to be outside and no longer confined, I allowed my eyes time to adjust, then padded through tight spaces, around sharp curves, and down many winding stone steps, until I found the exit a small distance from where the Sunday Falls crashed into the pool below. Built high enough into the stone cliff that others wouldn't know to look, the landing consisted of little more than a foothold. I extinguished and stowed the candle, and called for the wind to lower myself the final distance onto the soft ground behind a copse of trees. Beyond the trees, a public park lined the pool at the base of Storm's Keep Falls. Morning periods left public places empty, especially in the dark hours, so I ran freely between the trees and toward the soft grasses lining the poolside, my cloak billowing in the deepening night. Before reaching the water, I fell to my knees, breathed in the night's air, and allowed Selene to look upon my face, my hood falling away. I'd fought the urge to cry all day, anxious, angry, and wanting tears. Now, I closed my eyes, gathered moisture from the falls above my head, and let it rain down upon me. Dampening minutes later, a rich voice called my name.
Mairynne,
it whispered, a warning wrapped up in the hiss of my name. I smiled through my tears. Thalaja, come, sit with me.
Can you release your rain shower first?
I did, though the damp grass remained. He knelt beside me, cat-like in his posture and ready to pounce at the first sign of danger. How did you know to find me here? I asked.
That information is mine alone,
he answered, his voice low. I hadn't expected more. Thalaja kept his ways close to his heart, and he had a proven ability to find his way into spaces that seemed impossible. He'd come into our lives when I'd aged enough to have a budding affection for boys. Turn after turn, he'd shown his loyalty to the Evangales in many ways I knew, and I'm certain in ways only known to my father, Tenyo Azarine. Inside of Stormskeep, we had lived peaceful lives. With 3/4 of the perimeter sheltered by the mountain, the city lay within stone walls, and a wide moat provided a barrier to the outside. Visits to the domains of other castes were often tenuous, and Thalaja stood at my father's side everywhere he traveled. In a time before, my sister Yasmin had gossiped of his work to thwart a would-be fire-forger assassin while the Council of Nobles met at the High Cloud Court. Well enough, I said. Did Mairynne Evangale and his sons come to you today to discuss the rumors of caste uprising?
He did.
And?
I have a team assigned. It's no matter for you to worry over during mourning.
But I am to be empress before the moon goddess has completed her cycle, I spat, turning to look at him. All of these matters are mine to worry over. Thalaja gave me a tight smile, but didn't speak. He didn't have to say a word to make his point. After several silent moments, I relented. You're right. You've proven yourself and your guard is more than competent to care for these matters. But we will speak of this once the mourning period has passed.
Of course,
he said. We remained there on our knees and watching the water for some time until he said,
From the balcony, I heard your speech at the meeting this morning. Despite how afraid you must be, I believe it is the right decision.
I stared at him as heartbeats passed, trying to read beyond his stoicism. It is what you wished, is it not? My words tasted sour as they passed my tongue and lips.
It is, but not for the reasons you may believe.
He bowed his head, grasping idly at the blades of grass. Then what are your reasons, Thalaja? I searched his dark eyes. Whether accusing or begging for answers, I couldn't be sure. Instead of answering, Thalaja reached for me, and I moved into him, resting my head on his shoulder. Being close to him never offered physical warmth, yet my very soul seemed to sigh. What his lean arms did offer were both strength and the closeness I craved, and I deplored that our culture forbade a relationship with this man solely because his blood contained 2 castes. If anything, shouldn't that make him superior to those of us with only one? As we sat there in the silence of the night, a bone-shattering screech ripped across the sky, echoing from the stone castle, the citadel, and the rock faces surrounding the falls. The sound tore us apart. Thalaja, somehow already on his feet, brandished his scimitines, blue lightning crackling along the blades. My ears rang as I searched for the source. Water continued crashing into the pool, but despite the lingering vibration in my ears, there were no other sounds. The trees nearby remained motionless like the night. What evil could make such a sound? I whispered to Thalaja.
It's no sound I've ever heard,
he replied. Sheathing his blades, he held a hand out to help me from the ground.
Maybe Selene is watching over you, or bringing some warning. Let's go. I'll see you to your chambers.
He pulled me toward the trees. As Gensui, the head of our guard, Thalaja knew of the secret passages, so likely he knew that was how I had come to this place. I wondered briefly if he'd followed me, but thought that an unlikely option since he hadn't been with me in my chambers. And he'd met with the family Evangale earlier. When we came to the stone face, I brought the wind to lift us both to the ledge. Thalaja went first, and I severed the flow of magic as I stepped behind the stone that hid the entrance. The blackness complete, I fumbled to find the candle. Thalaja clapped, and the friction of his palms scraped in the darkness. Soon, blue lightning danced in a sphere between his hands. With a smile, he shifted his energy to one hand and held it high. The glow cast an eerie, moving light on the stairs and set shadows to dancing upon the walls. But the orb lit our way back up into the castle and eventually to my rooms. Once there, I opened the door, pushed the painting forward, and stepped inside. Thalaja stood in the opening, telling me without words he'd not be entering my private space. How wrong it seemed that he'd offer the fleeting contact in the park, yet he wouldn't cross the sacred line into my chambers, much like he wouldn't cross the lines drawn by caste. For this matter, I harbored bitter disappointment, yet I understood how to enact the necessary change. The cost was steep, but without the support of the Storm Sorcery Council, it seemed a price I must pay. Tightly, I nodded and leaned on the wall at the threshold.
"Good night, Mairynne. I'll find what caused that noise."
He dipped his head respectfully, showing deference to my station. "Listen, Thalaja, I understand that everyone believes my father won't return." I reached for the 2 stones at my neck. Something tells me otherwise. The fall of his face told me that even he believed otherwise.
"I fear that you are overly hopeful."
"That may be true." I took his free hand. "But I would like you to send word through your network. If there is a possibility that he may resume reign over Nantai, I do not want to take the throne. He and my mother were wonderful for our people." I allowed my gaze to drop to our joined hands. "And I am afraid that I will not be." I felt more fear than I wished to acknowledge, heavy fear over being contained in this castle. Storm's Keep held beauty and safety because by its very nature it was a fortress, but it also served as my stockade.
"Look at me, Mairynne."
I did.
Tenyo Azarine was a wise man. He chose his successor with confidence, and you will do his memory justice.
Thalaja had missed the breadth and depth of my worry. My throat tightened. Clearing it, I said, "I appreciate the vote of confidence, but will you do as I ask?" I pleaded.
"I have doubts that I will learn aught we do not already know, but I will do as my future empress asks."
He extinguished his sphere of lightning and lifted our hands. He brushed 3 kisses across my knuckles, more affection than he'd normally risk, then disappeared into the darkness.